So, good afternoon. Welcome to all. Um, this is the third day of the Institute Seminar Days series, virtual event, of course. Today, there are two talks by Amritanshu and Indumati. Um, as is a tradition, we have asked today one of our first year students, Ronnie Saiba, from the computational biology group, to chair this session. Ronnie, so it's your duty to see that the speakers are on time and we keep to time. So over to you, Ronnie. So looking forward to the talks by Amri and Indu today. See you.
Thank you, Arijit, for the introduction. And hello and welcome all. So, welcome to the third day of the Institute Seminar Week, Institute Seminar Days. And the first talk today will be from Professor Amritanshu, who is from the Maths Department. Please take over.
Thank you, Ronnie. It's, let me share my screen now. Okay, so after I gave the title for the talk, my idea of what to talk about has evolved a bit. Anyway, so it will not be so much about representation stability. And I would like this to be accessible to everyone. So please, stop me. Uh, do not hesitate to stop me if something is not clear and so on. So, so to begin with, let me introduce the symmetric groups. You take box n to denote the set of integers from 1 to n. And the nth symmetric group is a set of all bijections from this set onto itself. And these bijections are functions, so you can compose them. And that composition gives rise to the structure of a group. It's a group with n factorial elements. And we're interested in looking at each of these groups, not in isolation, but as an infinite sequence of groups. And the next thing I need to explain is what is a representation. So a representation is a realization of a group as matrices. And a simple example in the case of a symmetric group is that if you have a permutation sigma, you can represent it by what is called its permutation matrix. It's the matrix whose ith column is the sigma ith coordinate vector. So, this has the property that if I compose sigma 1 and sigma 2, then rho n of sigma 1 composed with sigma 2 will be the product of the matrix rho n sigma 1 and with the matrix rho n sigma 2. Another way of thinking about this is to say that the symmetric group acts on the space of vectors with n coordinates. We can think of them as column vectors, and then you just take this permutation matrix and act on this column vector. So you multiply it on the right by a column vector. And the effect it has is of permuting the coordinate vectors. So if you take a permutation matrix and multiply it with a coordinate vector, then you will get another coordinate vector corresponding to the permutation that you have used. And for n equals 2, let me show you the two permutation matrices corresponding to the two permutations. They are the matrix 1, 0, 0, 1 and 0, 1, 1, 0, as you can see here. So the symmetric group is perhaps the most fundamental of all finite groups. It arises when you have any system with n identical objects. Is somebody trying to say something? There is some your voices.
Excuse me, I think Professor Ganapati Bhaskaran's microphone is on. That's causing some echo.
Oh, okay. Maybe the admin. Yeah, can mute it. Okay, anyway, it's not too much. Let me carry on. Um, so, what I want to talk about is this notion of stability. And so let me just stick with this example of representation. So what I've described here is the Cn is a representation of Sn. So in fact, I have one representation of Sn for each n. So I have a representation of S0, the trivial group, the group of permutations of the empty set, S1, the group of permutations of the singleton set, S2, the group of permutations of the set with 2 elements, and so on. I have one representation of each of them. I have an infinite family of representations. And you observe that in these representations, some things are stabilized. So if you look at these representations, for example, if you look at the representation of Cn, where you're permuting the coordinates of the vector, then the invariant space, the space of vectors which are invariant under all permutations, consists of vectors where all the coordinates are equal. So its dimension is 1 for all n. This is an example of something that does not change with n. Okay, so it's a stability kind of result of the simplest kind. A slightly more complicated stability result would be this. You look at the symmetric group Sn acting on polynomials in n variables. If you like, you can just look at homogeneous polynomials of degree d in n variables. And the group acts by permuting the n variables. And if you look at the invariants, then this is the space of homogeneous symmetric polynomials of degree d. And if you ask how many symmetric polynomials of degree d are there, in a symmetric polynomial, all the monomials with so each monomial in a polynomial is going to have variable x1 raised to some power, variable x2 raised to some power, variable x3 raised to some power, and so on. And these powers will add up to d, because we're saying that, okay, it should be a polynomial of degree d. And when you look at a symmetric polynomial, the coefficients don't depend on which variable is raised to which power. It only depends on how many variables are raised to a given power. And so what you get is that the dimension of the space of homogeneous symmetric polynomials is the number of ways of writing d as a sum d1 plus d2 plus dot 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 dn, where these are the possible powers to which the various variables are raised. And the order in which you break down the sum doesn't matter. So you can just fix, say, d1 is less than or equal to d2 is less than or equal to dn. And this number is called the number of partitions of d with at most n parts. Okay, so it's the famous partition function. If you let n go to infinity or don't put a restriction on the number of parts, you get the number of partitions of d. But now the point is, okay, maybe I'll skip this slide. There's okay, why not do it? So there's another variant of this, but yeah, maybe I'll skip this. So Pn of d is the number of partitions of d with at most n parts. And it turns out that anyway, a partition of t cannot have more than d non-zero parts. So the number of partitions of d with at most n parts is the same as the partitions of d with at most d parts, all n greater than or equal to d. So here's something again where we that the space of invariant vectors in the representation stabilizes. Okay, so we'll come back to stability again later on. It's much more than just this invariant vectors, but to talk about that, I need to talk about irreducible representations and things like that. So now we have these representations, which are basically realizations of a group as matrices. And we say that two representations are isomorphic if there is a conjugating matrix X, an invertible matrix X, such that for each sigma, rho 1 sigma gets conjugated to rho 2 sigma. So there is a same X for all the sigma. So you can transform by a change of basis the representation rho 1 to the representation rho 2. So that's when you say that two representations are isomorphic. And a representation is reducible if it can be written as in a block diagonal form. For every g, there's a you can divide the basis into some k and n minus k, and for every g it will be k by k matrix block n by k, n minus k by n minus k matrix. So the matrices are all in block form. And the representation is irreducible if it's not isomorphic to such a block diagonal representation. And just as you know, in Fourier analysis, the e to the in thetas are the fundamental sort of modes of vibration. Here, these irreducible representations are the building blocks of all representations, and you can somehow write every representation as a sum of these building blocks of irreducible representation. So for the symmetric groups, the irreducible representations were classified more than 100 years ago, and they are called Specht modules nowadays, and they're usually denoted by V subscript lambda. This parameterizing set lambda is what we have seen before. I'm writing it slightly differently. It's a set of all partitions of n. Again, it's a number of ways of breaking up the number n into smaller parts, but the order in which you break it up, the order of the parts doesn't matter, and therefore, just to fix the convention, we always arrange the parts in weakly decreasing order. There's another way of writing down partitions, which is very useful. It's called the exponential notation. So I know a partition if I know how many times each integer occurs in it. So here's a partition 5, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1. Another way of talking about this partition is to say that it has 3 ones, 2 twos, 1 3, and 1 5. And so its exponential notation is 1 to the power 3, saying that it has 3 ones, 2 to the power 2, 3 to the power 1, 4 to the power 0, saying that there are no 4s at all, 5 to the power 1. And I could go on writing 6 to the power 0, 7 to the power 0, and so on, but it's unnecessary. So that classifies all the irreducible representations of Sn, so the partitions of n. This was done by Schur around 1900. And now we come to one of the main tools in studying representations of symmetric groups. It's symmetric functions.
Yeah. Can I stop you?
Yeah, sure.
Can you go to the previous slide? Is this easy to see? Why there is a correspondence between these partitions and irreducible representations?
It's not something I could explain right now.
Okay.
But
okay.
One thing that you can see, if you know a little bit of representation theory, you would know that the number of representations is the same as the number of conjugacy classes in a group.
Right.
Okay, and the number of conjugacy classes in the symmetric group is the number of partitions of n, because the conjugacy classes are determined by the cycle type of the permutation. So that level, we know that there should be this many representations. Yeah, so the number, okay, I guess that part, yes, the number should be this.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me introduce symmetric functions. One slight annoying thing here is that we'll be working with many variables. So the best way to, well, maybe not the best way, but maybe the quickest way to introduce them is to introduce what are called the power sum symmetric functions. So pk is just the function which is the sum of xi to the power k. Okay, and given a alpha partition alpha in exponential notation, that means it has a1 ones, a2 twos, and so on. To define p subscript alpha to be the product of pi to the ai as I goes from 1 to infinity. Now, even though there are infinitely many variables, it is possible to multiply these things. Somehow, when you multiply two such things, the contribution to each monomial will be finite, and without worrying about any issues of convergence and so on, you can multiply these things. You don't need to worry about infinite sums ever. Just take my word for it. And what you get from this, you just take these p alphas, you take all possible sums and products of them. Well, it's closed under taking products, I guess. These p alphas are already products of the pk's. So these p alphas, you take sums of them, the formal sums, and that gives you what is called the algebra of symmetric functions. So you can multiply these. So it's like symmetric polynomials in infinitely many variables. And there's some other bases. So these p alphas form a basis, but there's some other bases. There are bases involved where the variables can be raised to a power of 1 in it. So the first one is some sort of bosonic thing, and the second one is fermionic. And a fun fact is so you can H to 1. So these H to E are versus in some formal ring. Okay, we'll use this fun fact later on. So now let's talk about this ring of symmetric functions. It turns out that it's a graded ring. So we can talk about degree D homogeneous symmetric functions. These P alphas, where alpha is a partition of D. Where is it gone? Yeah, these P alphas, where alpha is a partition of D, will generate the degree D homogeneous polynomials. And we will also need a certain completion of this. So I just call it lambda hat. In this, you allow infinite, you allow terms which are in each degree D, you allow a term, but then you allow non-zero terms in infinity many degrees. And somehow, again, miraculously, it turns out that you can still keep the algebra structure. You will not get any infinite sums when you try to multiply two elements in this completion. And this is much like going from the ring of polynomials to the ring of formal power series. So yeah, so for example, this H1 is an infinite sum of polynomials. H0 is of degree 0, H1 is of degree 1, and so on. And it is an element of this completion. E minus 1 is also an element of this completion. And H1 times E minus 1 is 1 because of the fun fact that I had shown you earlier. This multiplication makes perfect sense in lambda hat, and the product is equal to 1. Now, when you have a permutation, just what I was telling Sushmita a little earlier, you can talk about its cycle decomposition. So you can just, normally you would write a permutation as, a bunch of inputs and a bunch of outputs, and it somehow mixes them up. But you can think of it as a directed graph. And in this directed graph, because the permutation is a bijection, each node has one in edge and one out edge. And so this graph becomes a disjoint union of cycles. And in this permutation here, you see that there are 2 1 cycles, no 2 cycles, and 1 3 cycle. So to each permutation W, we'll associate a symmetric function, a power sum symmetric function. Product I goes from 1 to infinity, pi to the power xi. So we will raise pi to the number of I cycles. So in this example, we will be associating to this permutation the symmetric function p1 squared. I'm sorry, this shouldn't be p to the power 3, it should be p subscript 3. Okay, and now we come to a brilliant tool of Frobenius, which is to turn the study of representations of the symmetric group into the study of symmetric functions. So if you have a representation, so what I was saying is that using Frobenius characteristic, you can turn computations of with representations into computations with symmetric functions. And these symmetric functions come with all inner product, where Schur functions are orthonormal and power sum symmetric functions are orthogonal. And the way this is used is like, you can get information about the decomposition into irreducibles using these inner products and Frobenius characteristics. So basically, character computations for Sn gives rise to computations with symmetric functions. And now I want to talk about another way of doing things, which is using what are called character polynomials. So we just take infinitely many variables, x1, x2, x3, and so on. And xi stands for the number of I cycles in a permutation W. And this gives rise to a function on Sn for each n. So starting with one polynomial, we get a permutation on Sn for each n. And if you have an infinite family of representations, you can say that it has polynomial character if there exists such a polynomial which gives its trace for every n. So these are clearly very, very special families of representations which are somehow coherent. They are very, And so, for example, if you take just the usual representation C to the n, our old friend, then its character is just the number of fixed points of W, which is the same as the number of one cycles in W. So that is an example of a representation which has polynomial characters. Others of interest are SimK, Cn, symmetric tensors. You could take polynomials in n variables. You could take or exterior tensors, and also these very interesting modules called while modules, which are reducible representations of GLN. And character representations which have character polynomials have very nice stability properties. I won't go into that. But here is the problem that the main result addresses. So given a family of representations, decide if it has polynomial character. And if you do decide that it has polynomial character, compute its character polynomial. And the assumption here is that we know how to compute the Frobenius characteristics of these representations, Vn. And so here's the algorithm. You just compute these Frobenius characteristics, add them all up, and treat them as an element of this completed symmetric function ring. You take that resulting fellow, whatever it is, and multiply it by E minus 1, which is E0 minus E1 plus E to the elementary symmetric functions. If the resulting element of lambda hat is actually in lambda, that means it's in the linear span of the power sum symmetric functions, then Vn has a polynomial character. And the way to get this polynomial character is to expand this thing in terms of the power sum symmetric functions, and then replace each power sum symmetric function by this expression I've written here, a product I greater than or equal to 1. This thing here is some sort of binomial coefficient, except that the xi is not a number, but it's a random, it's a variable. So this would be xi choose ai. And yeah, that's all I had to say. Sorry for going a bit over time. I'll stop now.
Can we see your last slide, Jamri? One more back, please. So is this whenever it has a polynomial character?
It's an if and only if condition.
Okay, and so can you just work this out as an example in E minus 1, H1 is 1, right? Capital
E minus 1, H1 is, yeah, is 1, that's right.
So in that example, what does it, is that a...
Yeah, that's a great example, and that is just your Cn. No, that's just a trivial representation. Trivial representation of Sn for each n. And yeah, I prepared another example, but anyway, maybe it's more complicated. It'll take a while to explain. That's the trivial representation.
Any more questions from the audience? So if not, I take this opportunity to thank Professor Amrit Anshu again for the wonderful talk.